Today we've got the candidate for governor of Texas, Beto O'Rourke. Thanks so much for coming back on.
Hey, Brian, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So you're out there talking to Texans more than any politician I think I've ever seen. What's resonating with them? Like, what are the issues that you're running on in your Texas governor bid?
Well, certainly the issues and the policies matter to people, but more than that, there is this, as you probably know, there's this fierce pride in Texas about who we are and what this state represents to the rest of the country and the rest of the world. And we want to get back to the really big things that we've always been known for. These really big dreams, these outsized accomplishments, this ambitious, aspirational vision. Right now in Texas, as you probably know, we can't keep the lights on. We had a power grid failure earlier this year that knocked about 5 million into complete darkness, in some cases for days, killed hundreds of people, including, unfortunately, an 11-year-old boy who literally froze to death in his bed because in the energy capital of North America, we could not keep the power going for him or his family. It's that level of incompetence and then the kind of extremism that you see in this abortion ban that sets a $10,000 bounty on the head of any woman who seeks to make her own reproductive health care decisions. It's gun laws that allow anyone to carry a loaded firearm in public without a background check, without any training whatsoever, despite the fact that we have 4 of the worst mass shootings in U.S. history here in Texas just in the last 5 years. It's these transgender bathroom bans and trying to decide which middle school girl can play which sports versus the really big things that we want to be doing. And most people, as I listen to them, want us to be focused on the things that are most important to them in their lives. So what kind of jobs are we creating in Texas? Are we going to seize the lead in the energy revolution that's taking place globally right now? I'm transmitting right now from Houston, Texas. This is the capital of the oil and gas industry for much of the rest of the world, which is wonderful. Can we build on that and make this the capital of the hydrogen industry, geothermal, solar, wind? Can we have the best public schools in America here in Texas and pay our Texas teachers what they're worth? So, Brian, the average teacher in Texas makes about $10,000 less than the average U.S. teacher. So most teachers in Texas are working a second or a third job even just to make ends meet, and it just doesn't work. And then one last idea is, and this is, this makes so much common sense. It's really hard for most of us to understand why it hasn't happened. Expand Medicaid and take yes for an answer from the federal government who will pay 95 cents on the dollar. It would bring tens of billions into Texas. We could hire more physicians, keep more of these rural hospitals open. 24 rural hospitals have closed on Greg Abbott's watch, and we could reduce the property tax burden for homeowners. We don't have an income tax in Texas. It's sales tax and property taxes. Bringing that Medicaid money in gets people the care they need, helps our communities, and reduces taxes. So there are some big things that we can do, but we got to get past the extremism and the incompetence of Abbott. That's what I'm hearing from people. That's why we're running this campaign. And we're going everywhere to make sure that we listen to and bring everyone in. So we're on day 6 of the campaign, and we've covered, I'm looking over at the odometer, we're at 1,393.5 miles so far and going.
Well, I want to dig into one of those issues specifically, and that is the electricity grid failing. That was after, a terrible freeze that basically wreaked havoc on Texas. Greg Abbott's now allowing the electricity providers to opt out of winterizing the grid by basically filling out a one-page form and check a box and pay $150. Like, that fee of $150 was written into the legislation and signed into law by these Republicans. I'm sorry, but what the fuck? How is that a response to 5 million people losing power and 700 people dying?
What you just described explains just about everything, because I mentioned, here is this energy rich, energy proud state that fiercely guards its independence, so independent that we're not part of the rest of the electrical grid in the United States of America because we're Texas and we've got this. And not only are we not requiring, or not only have we not required, the gas supply companies or the rest of the power grid to weatherize their equipment and infrastructure after electricity grid failures in 2011 and 2014, despite repeated warnings after the fact. But now, after this epic tragedy and failure on the part of our government, this wasn't, Mother Nature. It wasn't an act of God. It was the incompetence of man, and specifically the man in the highest position of public trust in the state. Despite all of that, now knowing what we do, there was not a single requirement made of those who were responsible for the blackouts, the devastation, and the death. And as you point out, the gas supply CEOs could, for $150, opt out of doing anything meaningful to protect the rest of us. What we should be doing is asking them to weatherize, for example, their wellheads, maybe $20,000 to $30,000 per wellhead, 1% to 3% of the cost of doing that. Maybe that's a lot of money. Maybe that's not a lot of money, but it pales in comparison to the tens of billions of dollars that the blackout cost this state, not to mention what is immeasurable, which is the loss of life. And here's the kicker. Within a month of the February blackouts here in Texas, Kelsey Warren, whose company made $2.4 billion in February on this tragedy, as people are suffering and dying, his company makes $2.4 billion. He turns around and writes Greg Abbott a $1 million campaign contribution check. So if you're looking for an answer, you have found it. He is our governor, beholden to his campaign contributors. And that is why he's doing nothing for the people of Texas. And to add insult to injury, every single one of us in this state will be paying a surcharge on our electricity bills for at least the next decade of 15%. That is the Abbott tax on Texas. And it's going to be a monthly reminder of the cost and consequence of this guy being in power.
To bring up another issue, abortions in Texas have declined by about half since the abortion ban that Greg Abbott signed into law took effect. If you win as governor, what would you have in your power to restore some of the rights of women in Texas? Like, I know that there are limitations, but what would you be able to do?
This abortion ban, this provision that encourages bounty hunters and vigilantism against Texas women in a state, Brian, that is already the epicenter of a maternal mortality crisis in the United States of America, is one of, if not the most dangerous, radical, extremist fringe laws that I've ever seen in Texas and maybe nationally. So at a minimum, we must repeal that. That's a no-brainer. But we've got to go beyond that, because part of the reason that we became the maternal mortality epicenter for so much of this country, and frankly, the developed world, is because of the consistent erosion of women's rights in the state of Texas to make their own decisions for their own health care and their own future, to even be able to see a doctor or get a cervical cancer screening. There have been laws passed over the last 10 years that have closed down, prior to this one, more than a quarter of our reproductive care and family planning clinics. So that's taken a terrific toll, a terrible toll on Texas women. So we have to correct that. And then we've got to do things like I mentioned, expanding Medicaid earlier, just ensure that the millions of Texans who cannot get care can finally see a doctor and be well enough to pursue their potential and certainly make their own decisions about their own bodies. It comes back to a question of trust. Greg Abbott doesn't trust Texas. He doesn't trust Texas women. We've got to trust one another again. And we certainly must trust women in this state to decide their future.
Which is especially ironic coming from the party of personal freedom. So when you ran for president, you'd mentioned taking AR-15s, and this was in the aftermath of a tragic shooting in El Paso Walmart that left 23 people dead. Now you're running for governor in Texas. It's obviously a different electorate. What's your position on this now, and how have you been able to reconcile your stance during the general into now during your gubernatorial run?
I'm glad you asked that. There's nothing in my mind to reconcile, because the truth is the truth. And most Texans can probably agree that we don't want to see our family members, our friends, our neighbors shot up by weapons of war. That AR-15, that AK-47, was originally designed for one sole purpose, and that is killing people as effectively, as efficiently, as quickly as possible. And that's exactly what it does. And we know that all too well in El Paso, but they know it in Sutherland Springs. They know it in Santa Fe High School. They know it in Midland, Odessa. They know it across the state and across this country, unfortunately. And so let's do the right thing. And let's make sure that we no longer have to worry about that. And let's also make sure that we protect the Second Amendment right to possess a firearm for hunting, for self-defense, for sport, for collection, for whatever reason. And that's something that we understand here in Texas. Most of us are gun owners. Most of us grew up in homes where we were taught the responsibility of owning and using a firearm. That was certainly my case growing up. And so I think we can get this right here in Texas. But what we don't want are these radical gun laws signed by our governor that allow what is called permitless carry, which is literally, Brian, you could walk out of your house here in Texas with a loaded firearm, no background check, no training whatsoever, and you could carry it almost anywhere that you pleased. And it's why so many in law enforcement begged the governor not to sign this, because it increases the chances that they're going to get shot. It decreases their ability to protect and serve the public, the community with whom they live. And in Texas, women are 24% more likely to be shot by an intimate partner than in any other state. And in Texas, get this, there were 35,000 licenses to carry a firearm back when you had to get a license, which you no longer do. 35 licenses to carry a firearm that were either rejected or revoked by law enforcement because they felt that someone was too much of a danger to themselves, too much of a danger to the community to have that gun. So now any one of those people can carry that gun in public, and the tens of thousands more, we imagine, who knew better than to even apply for a license to carry back when you still needed to have one, because they would have never passed the background check. So this certainly makes it much more dangerous to live in the state of Texas. And your number one job as governor is to keep the people of your state safe. And whether it's the grid, whether it's this abortion ban with the vigilante bounties being paid out, whether it's the 72,000 killed by Greg Abbott's incompetence in the face of COVID, or whether it's this gun law, Greg Abbott is making Texas less safe. And so these are the challenges that we have right now, but this is how we meet them. We go everywhere, bring everyone in, write nobody off, and take no one for granted, and make sure that we all understand the stakes of this election, and then get after it over the next year, making sure that we win it.
Now, the conditions when you last ran in Texas for the Senate were pretty phenomenal for Democrats. You know, between Trump and the Republican attempts at undoing Obamacare, Democrats were beyond enthusiastic. Right now, the conditions are obviously a little bit different. You know, Biden's approval rating is below 40%, and the party in power usually loses that power anyway. So how do you plan on winning in an environment that's less favorable to Democrats in 2022?
It's interesting. I'm not probably sophisticated enough to do the calculus on, what the velocity of the headwinds are from having a Democrat in the White House and this being the first midterm, and everything that's happened in the rest of the country this year, and where we are in polling and other factors and dynamics. And so I just keep my focus on Texas and travel to the state and try to bring people together and turn people out. And what I've seen, and again, we are on day 6 of this campaign, what I've seen in San Antonio, even in Pecos, Texas, which Donald Trump won by 69%, Laredo, McAllen, Edinburgh, Brownsville, Corpus Christi, last night in Houston, where we joined about 2,000 people on day 5 of the campaign who've all committed themselves to doing whatever it takes to win this thing. I feel really good about our chances. And there's no poll that could probably confirm this. There's no political scientist who would verify it. There's no consultant who would say that we have this in the bag. And I certainly don't think that we have it in the bag, but this is wholly possible. Yes, because of Greg Abbott's incompetence and cruelty and extremism, for sure, that creates an opening, but also because people in Texas want to do the big things again. And they're really excited about that. And what we are talking about in this campaign, when it comes to jobs, when it comes to schools, when it comes to Medicaid expansion, those aren't Democratic or Republican issues. They're not rural or urban. They're all of us. And it really seems to be connecting with so many people across this state right now. So I can only control what I can control, right? I can't control Biden or the national electorate or any other dynamic in this. And so for those things that we can control for, I feel really, really good. Thanks to the generosity of the people of this state, and even those beyond our borders in California and other parts of the country, we raised in the first 24 hours, I think, more than any gubernatorial campaign, certainly in Texas history, maybe in US history. And that is a reflection not of me and not of my political party, but of the intense interest in doing better in Texas. And so that may be an early indication of just how possible this is.
Well, speaking of the electorate, you've been kicking ass with Powered by People to register new voters. So what does the Texas electorate look like since that organization and other organizations began ramping up their ground games to register new voters in the state?
Yeah, there are, as you and I have discussed, millions of Texans. In fact, in 2020, 7 million plus Texans who are eligible to vote, but didn't cast a ballot. In some cases, in millions of cases, they were not registered. And so we're working to get them registered. In other cases, they were registered and either because of the voter suppression efforts had an obstacle in their way that wouldn't allow them to cast a ballot, or they just didn't feel like any of the candidates gave them a reason to vote. So we are addressing all of that. And as you mentioned, Powered by People, which your viewers have been so generous in supporting. Powered by People volunteers in Texas have registered more than 260,000 voters, which is a lot, but is insufficient to the millions out there that we still need to get. So they're still going to be working over the course of this next year to make sure that we try to sign everybody up, get them on the rolls, and stay in touch with them so they actually turn out in 2022. My job as a candidate, our job as a campaign, is to give them that reason to vote, to say not just how badly Greg Abbott has done, but what the great things are that we are going to do together. And both of those things need to be true. And voters need to hear both of those things from me, from our volunteers, anyone who's knocking on a door or calling in a phone bank on our behalf. So Powered by People, Annie's List, the Texas Organizing Project, Jolt, the Texas Democratic Party. There are so many partners, and I've named 6 out of probably 600 here in the state of Texas who are cranking right now and absolutely getting after it. And that's also encouraging. And when you come visit us in Texas, I'll introduce you to some of them. But these are the grassroots partners and allies who are not working solely for this one election or cycle, but they've been in these communities year in and year out, in some cases for more than a decade. And it's not too unlike what you saw happen in Georgia over the past 10 years. The conversion of a state, not so much from red to blue, but from non-voting to voting. That's what we are going to see in Texas. We ranked, I think, in the last election, 46th in voter turnout in the United States of America, the hardest state in which to cast a ballot in all of the United States. We're going to make sure we do everything we can to overcome that. And the help that you, your viewers, others have provided means the world of difference that we need right now. So I just want to say thank you for that as well.
Well, so what's the best way for us to help you? I know that there are obviously those voter registration organizations, and we've been doing everything we can to support those, not just in Texas but everywhere. I know, like you just said, Georgia is a case study in how successful that is. But what's the best way to help you on your run?
For those who are interested in being part of this, come to betofortexas.com. You can sign up for a volunteer shift really wherever you are. We'll put you on the phones or on a texting shift. Obviously, if you're in Texas, we want you knocking on doors with us. We just started a letter writing campaign that is going gangbusters in the first 6 days of effort. It turns out people really want to write letters, which is awesome. And I can only imagine what it feels like for those who receive a handwritten, personal, human-to-human letter, which is such a rare thing on the planet today. So you can sign up for a volunteership. You can also contribute money to the campaign and make sure that we have the resources to get to these 254 counties and reach those who will decide the outcome of this election. But whatever form that help comes in, even if you're just going to say a prayer for us tonight before you go to bed, thank you, because it is so encouraging for us here on the ground and in Texas, where the stakes could not be any higher and the election could not be any more important. And so super grateful to you all and grateful to have the chance to be able to talk with you.
Well, we'll leave it there. Beto O'Rourke, thank you so much. Keep kicking ass, and we'll be with you as you keep on crisscrossing the state.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good one.